Hey guys, today we're talking about how God shares his heart. Dim your lights, get comfortable, and enjoy. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this helps you fall asleep. When the first colors of the universe were still soft and uncertain, God walked quietly through the corridors of creation, feeling the rhythm of everything he had made pulsing beneath his feet. There were no clocks, no measures of time, only the slow, breathing glow of being. The world had learned to sing, to whisper, to move. But now something deeper called to him from within the silence between sounds. It was not the cry of distance, nor the ache of loneliness. It was the echo of love, searching for a way to be known. For all his beauty and light, God had kept one thing untouched, hidden behind the steady pulse of existence: his heart. Not because he feared to show it, but because he wanted the world to be ready to feel it. He sat at the edge of a newborn horizon, where the sky bent low and touched the water like two hands meeting. There, he waited. The sun rose slowly. No explosion, no shout. Just a warm breath spreading across the skin of the world. As he watched its light unfold, he thought about what it means to share. He had given the world his breath, his voice, his peace. But the heart was different. The heart is where meaning lives before it becomes sound, where tenderness waits before it turns into kindness. To share that would mean to become vulnerable, to allow creation not only to know his strength, but also his softness. He pressed his palm against the surface of the sea, and it trembled like a cord touched by warmth. "You've learned to move with me," he said softly. "Now can you feel with me?" The waves paused, their motion slowing to a heartbeat rhythm. For the first time, they didn't just echo his power, they reflected his feeling. The tide swelled gently, as if responding to something invisible, something tender. God smiled. That was the beginning. He rose and walked through the air as though it were water. Everywhere he passed, stillness followed, and in that stillness, his heart began to open like a dawn unfolding within him. The stars above dimmed slightly, not out of fear, but in reverence. They had seen his work, his voice, his dreams, but this was different. This was not creation being formed. This was the Creator revealing himself. He reached the first forest, the one that still smelled of beginning, and placed his hand upon a tree. The bark was rough, but alive with the slow pulse of growth. "Do you know what it means to love?" he asked. The tree did not answer, but its roots deepened into the soil as if reaching towards something unseen. Love, it seemed, was already there, waiting for language to find it. God closed his eyes and listened to the pulse within his own chest. It was vast but quiet, like an ocean held in one breath. Every beat sent ripples through creation. With each pulse, mountains leaned closer, rivers shimmered, and even the smallest grains of dust lifted into the air for a moment before settling again. His heart was speaking now, not in words or light, but in warmth. It spread through the fabric of everything, a golden hum that turned distance into closeness. For the first time, the world began to feel not only alive but loved. The sky learned gentleness, the sea learned patience, the wind learned to carry comfort instead of command. Even silence, which had once been a space between moments, now became a presence of its own, soft, holding, alive. But God's heart was vast, too vast to be contained by the sky or the sea. It wanted to touch every corner of existence, to meet the hidden, the broken, the lonely. It wanted to give warmth to shadows. So he walked deeper into creation, letting his heart lead. He came to the valleys where darkness gathered, the places untouched by light. They were quiet, not because they refused to sing, but because they had never been asked to. God knelt there, pressing his hand against the cold stone. "You are part of me too," he whispered. The stone, which had known only stillness, began to glow faintly from within. It wasn't bright. It didn't need to be. The glow was small but alive, the kind that stays even after eyes close. It was the first sign of compassion, and compassion, once born, never stays alone. It spread through the ground like light through deep water, reaching roots, reaching caves, reaching the quietest places that had waited since the beginning. The world sighed, as if it had been holding its breath for this. As he moved on, the air changed. It grew warmer, lighter. He could feel his heart unfolding further, not as a burst of power, but as a steady flow of tenderness. He remembered the first time he'd spoken and how words had created light. Now, he spoke again, but differently. "Be kind," he said, and the sound carried through the fabric of everything. Where it touched, edges softened, mountains learned humility, rivers slowed to listen to their own reflection. Even time seemed to pause long enough to feel what it usually only measured. He realized something then. His heart was not meant to be given away in pieces. It was meant to be shared, whole, endlessly, without depletion. Love, he saw, was not a gift that leaves you smaller. It was a fire that burns without consuming. He let that truth move through him until the air shimmered with its rhythm. He came upon a field of wild grass, the first field to ever dance. The wind was soft there, carrying the scent of beginnings. He placed his hand on the earth, and from beneath his touch rose a sound. Not a word, not a note, but something in between. It was the sound of gratitude, born without needing to be taught. The grass leaned toward him, as if bowing in prayer, but God shook his head gently. "No," he said, "you do not bow to me, you grow with me." And with that, the grass straightened again, reaching upward, shining with morning light. It was there, among the grass and wind, that he first understood the difference between being worshipped and being known. To be worshipped is to be seen from afar. To be known is to be felt within. He wanted the world to know him. He wanted his heart to live not above creation, but inside it. So he breathed again, deeply, slowly, and this time, the breath didn't form stars or oceans. It formed feeling. The air around him turned golden, and within that golden air came the essence of everything that would ever love. Kindness, compassion, forgiveness, longing, peace. These were not just emotions. They were the fingerprints of his heart, the living language of connection. He sent them into the world like invisible seeds, knowing they would bloom in their time. He walked until the horizon faded into memory. Everywhere he went, creation followed his heartbeat. It was no longer just existence, it was relationship. The mountains stood not just tall, but steadfast. The rivers moved not just fast, but faithfully. Even the shadows began to curve softly around light, learning the art of gentleness. As the day began to fold into dusk, God looked at everything, every motion, every shimmer, every heartbeat, and felt his own heart reflected back. He no longer stood apart from what he made. He was within it now, in the laughter of water, in the quiet of trees, in the pulse of everything that dared to love. The sky darkened, and he sat among the stars, who blinked around him like old friends. "You've seen me build, you've seen me speak," he said. "Now you'll see me feel." And the stars, bright and faithful, blinked slower, softer, as though nodding in agreement. God's heart pulsed once more, a slow, deep rhythm that filled the universe like a lullaby. Each beat said the same thing in a language older than light. You are loved, you are loved, you are loved. And the world, finally ready to hear it, began to whisper back. In rivers, in rain, in roots, in breath, creation answered in its own way. We know. When the echo of his heartbeat spread through creation, it did not fade, it deepened. Every sound that followed, every breeze, every ripple of water carried within it the trace of warmth that came from God's heart. It was a pulse that couldn't be seen, but could be felt, the kind that made the air softer and the stars closer. Wherever it went, things began to change. Light became gentler, shadows learned to stay without fear, and even silence grew generous, wrapping itself around life like a comforter instead of a cage. God stood within this growing calm and listened. It was the first time the world had spoken back, not with sound, but with feeling. He could sense the grass breathing gratitude, the mountains humming contentment, and the sea whispering peace to itself. He smiled. It was working. The heart he had shared was beginning to live in everything. He walked through a long valley, covered in soft gold light. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, and with every step, he could feel his heartbeat mirrored in the rhythm of the earth beneath his feet. He thought about what love really means, not the kind that commands or demands, but the kind that waits, that allows, that trusts. To share my heart, he said to the wind, is not to give it away, but to let others find themselves inside it. The wind understood. It swirled around him gently, carrying warmth into the far corners of the valley, into the hollows where loneliness hid, into the caves where fear had learned to whisper. Wherever that wind touched, the world began to glow from within. He came to a stream that ran clear and steady. Its surface reflected the light like a ribbon of glass. God knelt beside it, cupped his hands into the water, and lifted it to his lips. It tasted of beginnings, cool, pure, unburdened by time. As he drank, he could feel his love returning to him through it. You've carried me, he said to the stream, and you've carried the world. The stream bubbled softly, laughing in reply. It had never known laughter before, but now it did. It was the laughter of being seen, of being part of something greater than itself. As he rose, a small bird appeared, one of the first with wings strong enough to rise into the light. It circled above him, uncertain but curious. God lifted his hand, and the bird, drawn by something older than instinct, landed upon his palm. Its heartbeat fluttered against his fingers, small, quick, alive. You feel me too, he said softly. You carry a spark of my heart inside you. The bird tilted its head, as if listening, and began to sing. The song was fragile, unpolished, but it trembled with truth. In that moment, God realized that creation was beginning to return what he had given. His love was now not only received, it was reflected. He walked for what felt like centuries, but was really only moments in the measureless rhythm of eternity. Wherever he went, the world followed his emotion. The air shimmered when he felt joy. The trees bent closer when he felt compassion. Even the stars flickered differently when he felt peace. Everything was learned in his language, not one of grammar or sound, but of presence. His heart was teaching creation that to love was not to own or to control. It was to remain open, endlessly, even when misunderstood. He came to a mountain unlike any other, a place where light and darkness met in equal measure. It was there that he paused, feeling something stir within him. The more he shared his heart, the more he understood its weight. Love, after all, wasn't only about giving joy, it was about feeling everything. It carried the ache of separation, the fear of loss, the beauty of impermanence. He stood at the edge of that mountain and looked down at the valleys below, where rivers wound like veins and the earth pulsed like flesh. To love, he whispered, is to allow yourself to be broken and whole at once. He touched his chest, and light poured from between his fingers, not blinding, but warm and alive. It drifted down the mountain like petals carried by wind, falling into the world below. Wherever those petals landed, something beautiful began to bloom. Trust in one place, forgiveness in another, courage in another still. These were the colors of his heart, scattered freely for all who would one day walk there. But even as he watched them fall, he felt a pang, something he had not felt before. The world was vast, and though his heart reached everywhere, not everything could understand it yet. There would be places too wild to listen, beings too new to feel, moments too fragile to hold the weight of love. And that was all right. Love was patient. It did not demand to be understood. It waited. In time, he said softly, even silence will learn how to love. He sat upon a rock and watched the horizon fade into the colors of dusk. The air around him shimmered with warmth. He closed his eyes, and in the stillness, he felt every beat of every heart that had come from his own. They were scattered, small but alive. He could feel them like sparks across a great field, tiny lights flickering, learning, growing. It was not perfect harmony, but it was real. That was enough. As night settled, the stars opened their eyes again, spreading across the sky like seeds of light. God looked up and spoke to them quietly. You'll remind them, he said. When darkness comes, when fear grows loud, you'll remind them of my heart. Shine, not because you must, but because you can. The stars twinkled, understanding. From that moment on, their light was not just light, it was reassurance. Every night they would whisper across the cosmos, you are not forgotten, you are held in love. He stood again, stretching his arms as if embracing the horizon itself. The air moved through him like breath through a flute, and the sound it made was a hymn of belonging. The world listened. Even the quietest corners of creation stirred at the sound. And as the song drifted outward, he felt something new bloom inside him. A quiet joy that came not from creating, but from sharing. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once formed stars and carved rivers. They glowed faintly now, filled with warmth, not fire. These were not the hands of a maker, they were the hands of a giver. And in that realization, he felt peace deeper than silence, softer than light. His heart was no longer his alone. It had become the world's companion, its steady rhythm, its unseen comfort. He turned his gaze toward the future, the time when creatures with hearts of their own would walk the earth. He could see them faintly, their lives unfolding like threads in a vast tapestry. Some would love easily, others would forget how. Some would build, some would break, some would wander, and some would return. But through them all, his heart would continue to beat within theirs, quiet but eternal. He placed a hand over his chest one last time before resting, feeling that rhythm echo through the ages to come. You'll find me there, he said softly. Not above you, not behind you, but within. The wind carried his words away, weaving them into the song of the night. And as he closed his eyes, the world, every stone, every tree, every drop of water, began to hum the same melody back to him. It was a lullaby without end, a heartbeat shared between creator and creation, whispering through all things the same truth he had waited eternity to reveal. Love is the only sound that never fades. When the dawn returned, it did not rise quickly or shout itself into being. It unfolded slowly, like the heart of God itself, remembering how to breathe. The light came in layers, each one softer than the last, and the air shimmered with the memory of his love from the day before. Everything that had listened still carried his warmth. The trees swayed slower, the water flowed gentler, the wind moved as if mindful of its own kindness. The world was learning what it meant to be loved. It was not a lesson of command or fear. It was the quiet knowledge that to exist was already to belong. God walked through this morning as one walks through a familiar song, recognizing each note but still moved by its beauty. He passed through a meadow, still wet with dew, and the grass bowed slightly under his feet, not in worship but in greeting. Every drop of water that clung to the tips of the blades caught the light and held it for a moment before letting it go. And he smiled, because that was how he wanted love to live, to hold and to release, never to keep. As he walked, he could feel his own heartbeat traveling through creation, echoing in the wings of small birds, in the sigh of rivers, in the pulse of the soil. The world was breathing with him now, and it made him wonder what else the heart could do when it was shared completely. If they can feel me, he thought, then one day they will love as I do. And that thought filled him with joy so deep it trembled the air around him, like the soft vibration of music heard through the walls of a dream. He came to a river wider than any he had seen before. It curved through the land like a silver thread, stitching morning to memory. God knelt by its edge and placed his hand upon the water. Instantly the current stilled, as though the river had been waiting to listen. "You know how to move," he said. "But do you know why?" The water shimmered, uncertain, and he smiled gently. "Because love moves too. It never stays in one place. It flows, it reaches, it returns." The river began to ripple again, but this time its current followed a new rhythm, one that matched the slow beat of his heart. "Now you understand," he whispered. "You are not meant to rush, only to reach." He watched the water continue its journey and knew that the river would carry his lesson to places he had not yet touched. Every droplet would whisper it to another and another, until the whole world understood that love was not about holding, it was about becoming. And so he rose and walked again, his shadow stretching softly across the land. Far ahead, a mountain stood waiting, tall and still, its peak lost in the quiet mist of morning. God began to climb. With every step, the air grew thinner and the silence deeper. It was not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of listening, the kind that waits for something sacred to be spoken. When he reached the summit, he stood above the clouds and watched the light move beneath him like a slow tide of gold. He placed his hand over his chest and felt his heart beating strong and steady. The world below pulsed with it. He could feel every tree, every stone, every spark of life that had learned to echo his rhythm. It was beautiful, but there was more. Love, he knew, was not finished. "I have shared my warmth," he said to the wind, but warmth fades. I have shared my peace, but peace must be remembered. What I must give now is something that stays even when I am silent. The wind circled him gently, curious, waiting. He closed his eyes, and his heart opened wider than before. From its depths came not light this time, but colour, soft, endless colour that poured into the sky. It rippled across the heavens, turning blue into rose, gold into violet, white into every shade of mercy. It was love made visible, love given shape through beauty. The clouds glowed from within, and even the farthest corners of the world began to shimmer with a light that had no name. "This is my heart made seen," he said softly, "so they may remember even when they cannot hear." As the colours drifted across creation, something new awakened inside the hearts of living things. Wonder. For the first time, the world did not only feel his love, it saw it. Wonder became the mirror through which love reflected itself. It lived in sunsets, in the slow curve of waves, in the hush that comes when snow falls. And in every act of awe, God's heart was shared again. He stood on that mountain for a long time, watching his own love ripple outward until it touched the edge of the sky. The stars, still faintly visible from the night before, began to blink in approval, as though they too were warmed by this new light. He knew that what he had given would outlast even the stars. It would live in the eyes of those who looked with gratitude, in the silence of those who forgave, in the laughter of those who dared to hope again. That was what it meant to share the heart, to let it be felt in places where he himself would not stand. As the day unfolded, he descended the mountain. The air around him carried the faint hum of creation's gratitude. Every leaf that rustled, every stream that moved seemed to whisper "thank you" in its own language. He didn't answer aloud. He simply listened, for listening was the truest form of love. At the mountain's base, he came upon a small clearing where the earth was rich and soft. Kneeling, he placed his hand upon the ground. "Here," he said gently, "they will grow." He pressed his palm deeper until his heartbeat passed through the soil. "This is where my heart will live, in them." And with that, he breathed once more, and from the soil rose the first seeds of compassion. They were not yet human, not yet aware, but they carried within them the potential to feel as he did, to love, to weep, to forgive, to remember. The seeds shimmered briefly before sinking back into the ground, waiting for their time. God stood and brushed the dust from his hands. "When they bloom," he said softly, "the world will know what it means to carry my heart." He walked on, following the slow bend of the river. As the sun climbed higher, he felt something stirring inside him, a tenderness even deeper than love itself. It was the desire to stay close to what he had made. "I will not rule from above," he decided. "I will dwell within." From that moment, his heart stopped being something distant. It became the pulse that lived in every living thing. In every breath drawn, his love was there. In every heartbeat, his rhythm lived. In every act of kindness, his spirit moved. He had not only shared his heart, he had become it. Time passed, though time had no name yet. The world learned to change, to grow, to rest, and in every season, his presence could be felt in a new way. In spring, he was the warmth that woke the soil. In summer, the laughter that filled the air. In autumn, the wisdom of letting go. In winter, the patience of stillness. Each change was a conversation between his heart and the world. Each moment a reminder that love never leaves, it only changes form. One evening, when the horizon burned gold and violet, he sat beside a quiet lake. The water reflected the sky so perfectly that it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. He gazed into the reflection and saw his own heart pulsing there, not as light or color, but as movement, gentle, alive, endless. The sight filled him with quiet joy. "This is what it means to be known," he said. "Not to be worshipped, not to be feared, but to be felt in everything that moves." The lake rippled softly, carrying his words across its surface, and when they reached the far shore, the wind picked them up and carried them farther still. They passed through trees, through clouds, through every living thing, and wherever they went, they became truth. By nightfall, the world glowed faintly with that truth. Even in darkness, the warmth of his heart could be felt, like embers hidden beneath the ashes of sleep. The creatures of the night walked softly, guided by an invisible comfort. And God, seeing this, rested at last. He looked upon all that was and whispered, not to create, not to command, but simply to affirm, "It is good because it loves." His voice blended with the heartbeat of the world, and for a moment, there was no difference between creator and creation. Everything was one great pulse, steady, endless, whole. As he drifted into silence, the stars leaned close, the rivers slowed, and even the wind hushed its restless wandering. The universe itself seemed to listen to the sound of God's heart still beating through all things. And in that stillness, a promise was born. A promise that as long as there was breath, as long as there was motion, his love would remain. It would be in the smallest kindness and the grandest gesture, in the tear and in the smile, in the beginning and in the end. For his heart, once hidden, now lived everywhere, and when creation breathed, it breathed with him. That was how God shared his heart, not by keeping it safe, but by letting it become the world itself. When the night arrived, God did not summon it with command, but welcomed it the way one welcomes an old friend at the door, with patience, with warmth, with no need for words. The darkness came quietly, like velvet unfolding over the shoulders of the world, and as it settled, God moved through it with the gentleness of breath itself. He did not light the sky immediately. He let the shadows rest, let them remember that even absence could hold peace. Everywhere he went, his heart spoke softly, not in thunder or flame, but in the subtle pulse of presence, the kind that steadies trembling hands, the kind that makes silence feel like a companion instead of a cage. He walked by still lakes that mirrored the stars so perfectly they seemed to breathe with the heavens. The surface trembled only when he passed, and each ripple carried his reflection outward until it became indistinguishable from the sky. "Do you see?" he whispered to the water. "You are not separate from the light you reflect." And the lake, though wordless, shimmered in answer. That shimmer became a kind of language, one the future would call kindness, the way light and shadow agree to share the same space. Through the quiet fields, he passed like wind through tall grass, and each blade bent not in worship, but in recognition. The earth, which had been waiting since the beginning to understand love, finally began to feel it. It wasn't an emotion. It was a remembering. Every root and rock and grain of soil understood that to love was simply to belong. He reached a wide plain where nothing had grown yet. It was bare, but not empty. He knelt, pressing his hands into the untouched ground. Here, he said softly, is where the heart will learn its deepest lesson. He opened his palms, and light, not bright but living, flowed into the soil. That light was patience, and it moved slowly, threading itself through the sleeping earth until it hummed. From that hum came warmth, and from that warmth, life would one day rise. He stayed there a long while, listening to the hum beneath his fingertips. It was faint, fragile, but alive, the first promise of compassion yet to bloom. You will understand someday, he said, that love is not found in the loud or the sudden, but in the steady, the way rivers carve mountains by persistence, not power. As he stood, the first wind of the night brushed past him. It carried the scent of the future, wildflowers not yet born, rain not yet fallen, prayers not yet spoken. God inhaled, and in that breath, he tasted hope. You are what I leave behind, he told the wind. Carry my heart where my voice cannot go. The wind understood, swirling around him once before setting off across the plains, spreading warmth wherever it went. He climbed a hill then, small and soft, where the horizon curved like a sleeping child's back. There, he rested. Above him, the stars gathered close, shining not with command, but with comfort. They blinked their slow, eternal rhythm, and God listened to it as one listens to the breathing of someone they love. Even the night sings, he said to himself. Even the darkness carries me. He reached into his own chest and drew out not fire this time, but light shaped like pulse, a rhythm more than a glow. He released it into the air, and the world caught it like music. The crickets in the grass began to echo its tempo. The rivers learned to murmur in time. The leaves began to tremble gently, not from wind, but from understanding. The whole world had become an instrument of his heartbeat. And in that moment, God realized something profound. Sharing his heart was not about giving it away. It was about awakening it everywhere. He was not dividing himself. He was multiplying wholeness. Every creature, every wave, every whisper of wind now carried a small, invisible note of him. They didn't know it yet, but they were singing. He stood again, the hill glowing faintly beneath his feet. Let this be my promise, he said quietly, that wherever love is felt, there I am. Wherever kindness lingers longer than it must, there my heart continues. The night deepened, rich and vast, but never lonely. He looked up once more at the stars, those patient watchers, and said, when they grow weary, remind them that my heart does not fade. It listens, always. The stars brightened in answer, their light crossing centuries to reach every place that would one day forget how to hope. And when God finally turned to rest, the world kept beating with his rhythm. The rivers hummed, the winds carried warmth, the earth pulsed beneath the weight of dreams not yet dreamed. His heart was everywhere now, not above creation, but within it, quiet and alive, whispering through everything that loved. I am here. I am always here. When the third day unfolded, the light moved differently, slow, alive, as if it were breathing through every color that existed. It did not rush across the sky, but lingered, golden and soft, wrapping the world in the kind of warmth that comes after understanding. God stood within it, quiet and still, feeling his heart stretch through every living thing. The rhythm he had shared was now part of everything that breathed, everything that moved, everything that simply was. He could feel it in the pulse of rivers, in the trembling of leaves, in the slow exhale of the mountains. Each was a small reflection of his heart, unique, imperfect, but alive. and that was how he wanted it to be. Perfection was stillness, and love was movement. Love needed to bend, to change, to fall and rise again. He had not made the world flawless. He had made it capable of learning. He walked through the morning mist, his steps leaving no mark. But every place he passed began to glow faintly, as if recognizing its maker not by sight, but by presence. Around him, the air hummed with the sound of things growing, the quiet stretching of roots, the sigh of branches learning to reach for the sun, the first murmur of creatures finding voice. The world had begun to dream on its own now, and its dreams were full of love. He felt it, the tender ache of connection, the gentle pulse of life touching life. Yet within that beauty was something new, something even he had not fully known: fragility. Love, once given, could not be contained, and fragility followed love like shadow follows light. It was part of the gift. To share his heart meant to let it be broken again and again, and to trust that it would heal in the hands of those who felt it. He smiled as he understood this. To love fully, he whispered, is to allow the possibility of sorrow. But sorrow is the proof that love existed. The mist parted before him, revealing a valley full of quiet golden grass. It swayed slowly under the touch of wind that carried the scent of everything new. He stepped into it, and the blades bent and rose again, brushing against his feet like a greeting. In the center of the valley stood a single tree, the first of its kind to grow from the seeds he had sown in the soil of compassion. Its trunk was pale and strong, its leaves the color of sunrise. God approached it with reverence, for this was no ordinary tree. This was where his heart had chosen to rest for a moment, to see itself reflected in creation. He touched its bark, and it pulsed faintly beneath his palm. "You carry my rhythm," he said softly, "and soon they will too." The tree did not answer, but its branches reached toward him like open hands. From within its roots came a gentle hum that matched his heartbeat. It was the sound of belonging, of something that had never known separation. As he stood there, he saw how the light filtered through its leaves and scattered across the ground in fragments of gold. Each fragment was a piece of his heart, falling quietly into the world, waiting to be found. "One day," he said to the tree, "they will call this beauty, but beauty is only love made visible." He looked upward, and the sky shimmered as if it understood. The clouds drifted like slow thoughts, and for the first time, he noticed how silence could glow. It was a gentle kind of silence, not empty, but full, like the pause before a word that matters. He sat beneath the tree, and as he did, the ground seemed to breathe around him. He rested his hand upon the earth and felt everything moving just slightly. The slow dance of roots, the steady heartbeat of the soil. It was the same rhythm that had once lived only within him, now alive everywhere. "This is how my heart survives," he said quietly. "Not by being protected, but by being shared." For a long while, he watched the world. Creatures had begun to move across the valleys and rivers, small and uncertain but curious. They did not yet have names, but they had instinct, and instinct was the beginning of trust. He watched as they discovered one another, how they paused, how they approached, how they retreated, and how they returned. Every gesture between them was a reflection of his love, learning how to walk. He felt proud, but also protective. "They will not always understand," he said to himself. But misunderstanding is not the end of love. It is the soil from which it grows deeper roots. The sun rose higher, and the world shimmered in gold. He felt time move around him for the first time, not as something lost, but as something living. Time, he realized, was the heartbeat of change, the proof that love continues. He walked from the valley to the edge of the sea, where waves rolled and sighed against the sand. The ocean, vast and eternal, greeted him with a low, resonant tone. He smiled at the sound, for it reminded him of his own breath. "You carry my song well," he said to the sea. "Teach them to listen for it." The waves moved higher in response, their foam glowing faintly in the sunlight. And as he watched them rise and fall, he saw something beautiful hidden in their rhythm: surrender. The ocean never fought against the shore. It returned again and again, always giving, always receiving. "That," he whispered, "is the heart I want them to have." As he spoke, a single tear slipped from his eye and fell into the water. It did not sink, it became light. That light drifted beneath the waves and scattered into countless smaller lights until the entire sea shimmered with it. "That is my promise," he said softly. "Even in sorrow, love becomes something new." He turned away from the sea and began to walk inland again, following the paths that had not yet been made. Wherever he stepped, the ground bloomed for a moment, then faded back into calm. He wasn't creating anymore, he was blessing. There was a difference. Creation brings form, but blessing brings meaning. And meaning, he realized, was how the heart speaks when words are too small. He came to a quiet hill where the wind gathered itself in circles. He sat and listened. Each gust carried the murmur of something ancient, the beginning of emotion itself. Joy, fear, longing. They moved through the air like invisible rivers, shaping the future long before it arrived. He let them pass through him, feeling each one, accepting each one. Love did not deny these feelings. It held them. Every joy carried sorrow. Every sorrow carried grace. Every longing carried faith. His heart expanded again, stretching beyond the edges of heaven, wide enough now to hold everything that would ever be. And as he listened, he began to hear something else. A faint echo of his own heartbeat returning to him from far away. It was softer than before, but it was there, steady and sure. It came from the living things, from their tiny pulses and their simple acts of being. They were beginning to echo him, not through sound, but through compassion. When one creature comforted another, his heart stirred. When the river carried life to the soil, he felt gratitude. When the wind cooled the weary earth, he smiled. His love had learned to speak in the smallest voices. "This is how my heart will continue," he said, "through every act that asks for nothing in return." The thought filled him with peace. He had not created worshippers. He had created partners in tenderness. Night began to fall again, and the stars returned, patient and quiet as ever. They blinked like the rhythm of breath, and he looked up at them with affection. "You've watched me since the beginning," he said. "Now you will watch them. Remind them, when they look up, that my heart still beats." The stars shimmered in agreement, their light spilling across the dark sky like scattered notes of a lullaby. The moon rose, pale, calm, reflecting only borrowed light, and God loved it for that. It was the perfect symbol of what he had made: reflection, not rivalry. Love did not need to shine on its own to be real. Sometimes love was simply the ability to carry someone else's light. As he looked across the sleeping world, he felt his heart hum once more. It was stronger now, heavier, but in the most beautiful way. It carried every song, every silence, every promise, and he knew, as he listened to that heartbeat echoing through the wind and the water, that he could finally rest, not because his work was finished, but because it would never truly end. He lay down upon the grass, and the earth rose slightly beneath him, as if to cradle him. His eyes closed, and in that moment, the whole world exhaled. The rivers slowed, the stars softened. Even the air seemed to hold its breath in reverence. He was not gone. He was everywhere now, not in form but in feeling, not in command but in connection. His heart had become the steady pulse of creation itself. From that day forward, love would never again be a visitor. It would be home. It would flow through laughter and tears, through birth and death, through joy and longing. And though many would forget its source, its rhythm would never stop. For the heart of God, once shared, could not be taken back. It would live forever, in sound, in silence, in all things that reach for light, even when they do not know why. And in that quiet, eternal heartbeat, creation slept and dreamed and loved, unaware that the pulse it felt inside itself was the same one that began before time, the same one that still whispers through every breath, "I am with you, I am you, I am love." When night drifted away once more and morning arrived quietly over the edge of creation, God opened his eyes to a world that was now fully alive with his heartbeat. The air shimmered with color that was not yet light and not yet sound, but something in between. A vibration that made the soul lean forward as though listening to a secret. He rose slowly, feeling the rhythm of every living thing move through him. The grass sighed beneath invisible wind. The rivers pulsed in their patient journeys. The mountains stretched upward in silent trust. All of them were speaking in the language of his heart now. But this new day would not be about creation or blessing. It would be about trust. To share his heart completely meant to let it move freely through others, to let it wander where he himself might not go. Love was no longer his possession. It had become its own living force. And so he walked into the dawn not as a maker, but as a listener, a witness to what love would do when left in the hands of the world. He moved through a valley bathed in gold mist. The air smelled of soil and sunlight. In the distance, he heard the laughter of water falling over stone, a sound that reminded him of the first time he spoke to the rivers. But this laughter was new. It was higher, lighter, touched with joy that did not come from him directly, but from what he had made. The river had learned to rejoice on its own. He smiled and knelt by its edge, watching light scatter across its surface. "You've grown," he said softly. The water replied in ripples that danced toward his hands, and he could feel them humming with their own happiness. It was then he realized that love had begun to teach itself. He walked onward, following the rhythm of this self-born joy, and every step brought him closer to understanding something deeper. His heart was no longer just within creation. It was between river and stone, between breath and silence, between touch and letting go. Love existed in the space of connection, in the invisible bond that made two things aware of each other. It was there that his heart truly lived now, in relationship. As he crossed the plains, he saw the first small creatures of the world interacting. They were simple, fragile, uncertain, but they were not alone. One shared food with another, one offered shelter, one stayed behind to guard the weak. There was no command, no law, no fear, only instinct. guided by something ancient and quiet. They had inherited his rhythm without knowing it. Compassion had learned to move through hands and gestures, through the tilt of a head and the soft call of care. He watched in awe. "You carry me," he whispered, "even when you do not know my name." The realization filled him with joy, but also with humility. For the first time, he understood that his heart did not need to be worshipped. It only needed to be lived. Love was not made stronger by praise. It grew in the act of being shared. He continued walking, and the world changed around him. The sun climbed higher, and the heat shimmered on the horizon. The light grew sharp, and the land stretched wide like an open book. In the distance, he saw a storm gathering, dark, immense, breathing. He moved toward it, feeling its pulse match his own. The storm was not anger, it was energy. It was creation's way of releasing what it could not hold. When he reached its edge, he raised his hands, not to stop it, but to understand it. The wind roared around him, pulling at his robes, and the clouds twisted above like thoughts too vast for words. Lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder rolled deep and low. The world was learning to express itself in power. It was learning to feel. "Do not be afraid of this," he said to the sky. "You are not chaos. You are emotion finding its voice." The storm responded with a sound so loud and pure that it shook the mountains. But when it faded, when the rain fell softly over the earth, the air smelled clean and new. Everything glistened. God tilted his face upward and let the rain fall against his skin. Each drop was a memory, a fragment of the love he had shared, returning to him in a new form. "Even the storm carries my heart," he said. "Even fury can become tenderness." As the clouds drifted away, a rainbow rose behind them. Light divided, but not broken. He gazed at it and saw within it the reflection of his own heart. Unity through difference, wholeness through color. "This," he said softly, "is what it means to love in a world of many." Each hue was an emotion: joy, sorrow, trust, forgiveness, wonder, peace. Together they made beauty. Alone they were incomplete. The rainbow became his quiet covenant, a promise that diversity was not separation, but harmony waiting to be remembered. He moved on through the renewed silence that followed the rain. Every droplet that clung to a leaf seemed to whisper thanks. He touched one gently, and it reflected the entire sky in its small curve. "You hold more than you know," he said. He walked until night began to arrive again. The world glowed faintly beneath the first silver of the moon. Fires of living things flickered in the distance, tiny lights pulsing in patterns, creatures communicating in rhythm. Each pulse reminded him of his heartbeat traveling through all things. The stars began to appear, and he listened. Their hum was steady, ancient, a song that never truly stopped. "Even the stars keep time with my heart," he thought, "but they sing it differently now." He lay upon the grass, looking upward, and let their light fill his vision until he could not tell where he ended and the sky began. "This is how it was meant to be," he said quietly. "Not me above them, but me within them." The moon brightened, and he could feel it pull at the oceans, guiding their rhythm. It was gentle but sure, never forcing, only inviting. "That is love," he said to himself, "to guide without control." As he rested there, he began to see the future unfolding, not as certainty, but as possibility. He saw those who would come after, walking the land, speaking, dreaming, building. He saw them struggle, lose, forgive, and begin again. He saw them searching for meaning, looking to the stars and the sea and the silence, asking, "Where is God?" And he smiled because he would already be there. In their asking, in their reaching, in the simple act of seeking love at all. "They will look for me above," he said, "but I will be within. I will live in every question that leads to kindness, in every doubt that ends in wonder." The wind grew softer, wrapping around him like a blanket woven from breath and time. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the world sleeping. Even sleep, he realized, was an act of trust. To rest was to believe in the safety of the unseen. "Even this," he whispered, "is a way of sharing my heart." The next morning came not as a blaze of light, but as a sigh of color. The horizon glowed pale gold, and the world stirred slowly beneath it. He rose again, and as he did, the ground seemed to hum beneath his feet. He looked out across the land and saw that love had begun to take shape in ways he had not imagined. Flowers turned toward the sun, even when clouds hid it. Rivers found new paths when stones blocked their way. Even shadows began to soften around the edges, allowing light to pass through them more easily. Love was teaching the world resilience. He walked among it all, feeling its lessons in return. "To share my heart," he said, "was never to keep it whole, but to let it grow through the breaking." He reached down and picked up a small stone from the path. It was smooth, shaped by the river's persistence. He held it in his hand and smiled. "Even time is love's sculptor," he whispered. He placed it back on the ground carefully, as though setting down a truth. As the day grew long, he reached another mountain, taller than the rest, steep and silent. He began to climb, not to command from above, but to see as love sees, from every angle, every height, every distance. The climb was slow, and with each step he could feel the pull of gravity reminding him that even he was bound to the laws he had written. The path twisted through shadow and light, through stone and wind, until finally he reached the summit. From there, he could see everything. The oceans shining like veins of silver, the forests breathing like lungs, the valleys glowing like memories, and for a long time, he simply looked. "This is my heart made visible," he said, "and yet they will forget. They will see beauty and call it ordinary. They will hear music and not know it is me. But that is all right. Love does not demand to be recognized. It only asks to remain." He stayed until the stars returned, and in their shimmering patterns, he saw stories forming, the future language of hearts trying to remember. "They will tell stories of me," he said. "Some will be true, some will not. But all of them will be reaching toward the same thing, the echo of my heartbeat in their own." The wind rose around him again, whispering softly, almost like a lullaby. He closed his eyes and let it pass through him. In that stillness, he could feel every beat of every heart in the world, from the smallest creature hidden beneath leaves to the largest whale moving through the deep. Each pulse was a prayer, even if unspoken, even if unknown. "This," he said, "is how my heart endures." And as he stood upon that mountain, watching the world breathe below, he understood that his greatest act was not creation, but connection. He had not built a kingdom, he had built a conversation. Every moment, every movement, every life was part of it. His heart spoke through storms and stillness, through joy and sorrow, through loss and return. There would be pain, yes. There would be forgetting. But even forgetting was part of remembering, because love, once felt, could never be erased. He looked once more at the horizon where night met day, and he whispered the final truth of that long golden morning. To share my heart is to trust that it will keep beating even when I am silent. And so he was silent, not as absence, but as faith. The wind carried his quiet through the valleys and forests, over oceans and mountains, through all time and space, until even the smallest breath of life could feel it. His heart no longer needed to speak. The world was speaking for him, and somewhere beneath all sound, beneath all time, beneath the weight of all beginnings and endings, the steady rhythm continued, unchanging, eternal, full. The heartbeat of everything that ever was and ever would be, whispering through the silence the same eternal phrase that started it all. You are my heart, and I am yours. When the last morning of this circle rose, it did not declare itself with trumpets or blaze, but with the hush of a room where someone you love is still sleeping, and you choose to move more softly. God stood inside that hush and listened to how the world now carried his heart without needing to be reminded. The rivers lifting it like steady hands, the trees holding it like patient teachers, the wind returning it like a letter faithfully delivered. He felt the countless ways love had learned to travel, across water in the shape of reflection, across distance in the shape of memory, across sorrow in the shape of staying. And he knew that this day would not be about beginning or ending, but about belonging, the way tide belongs to moon and ember belongs to night. So he walked, not to see what remained unfinished, but to bless what was already whole. And every step he took braided a little more mercy into the weather. The fields answered by breathing deeper, the hills by standing kinder. He came to a threshold of light, where dawn and afternoon shook hands and asked the air to carry a promise that didn't need paper. Wherever two lives touched without trying to own one another, there his heart would find a chair. He set the promise down like a cup on a saucer, and the cup did not rattle. From there, he visited the old places, shorelines that had learned to pronounce return without resentment, doorways that had learned to hold both leaving and arriving, kitchens that had learned the grammar of warmth, and he let his silence do the speaking, because silence, when it has been taught by love, is a fluent language. At a lake smoothed to a single thought, he leaned close, and the surface gave back not his face, but the faces of those who would someday forgive one another in rooms with poor lighting and honest chairs. He smiled at the futures, and they, feeling somehow seen across time, loosened their shoulders. He climbed then to a hill that knew how to watch the whole day without judging its clouds, and at the top he opened his hands and let what was left inside them drift like seeds. Courage for the things that cannot be hurried, gentleness for the truths that ought not be shouted, humor for the doors that only open when you don't push, and a small, bright coin of wonder for pockets that think they are empty. The seeds did not fall so much as remember where to land, and by the time they touched soil, you could hear a thin ringing, as if distance itself had become a bell, and someone kind was telling you it was time to come home. He looked out over the world and saw how the voice he once found had taught language to become shelter, and how the heart he once shared had taught power to become service. He saw storms that had learned to apologize by watering orchards, and deserts that had learned to listen by saving the night for stars. He saw hands, millions upon millions, choosing the softer way when the loud way would have been quicker, and he blessed every slowness that saved a tenderness from being dropped. Then, because completion without continuity is only a museum. He took the long breath that joins what was to what will be, and he braided it through the hour like a ribbon you can't see, but somehow feel brushing your wrist. Down in the valley, a child who did not yet have a word for hope put a pebble in a pocket, for later and later arrived kinder because of it. In a city not yet made, a window was opened for no reason except the air, and the air entered and forgave the room for being small. In a wilderness, a path bent around a nest, and the nest did not know it had been spared but sang anyway. God gathered these tiny mercies the way a parent gathers drawings from a day at school, imperfect, wrinkled, absolutely holy, and he pinned them to the inside of the sky where only courage looks. He felt the old ache of love, how it breaks to make more room, how it empties to hold more light. And he welcomed the ache because it meant the story was still porous enough for grace to keep arriving. Now evening tilted its amber bowl and poured itself across the ridges, and he spoke once quietly, so the sentence could be heard by the smallest things first. Keep what is soft without letting it be taken. Give what is strong without making it heavy. Let everything you touch leave more room than it found. The sentence went out wearing ordinary clothes, and no one knew it was divine until their breathing found a better rhythm. He turned toward the dark then, not to banish it, but to be companion, and darkness, remembering the lessons of earlier days, widened its pockets for travelers and stitched glowworms into the hems. He placed a hand over the heart of night and felt the syncopation of 1 billion lives failing and mending, losing and learning, waiting and choosing, and he pressed gently until the beats lined up just enough to keep fear from deciding the weather. And because a circle asked to close needs a ribbon, he walked back to the first tree, the one that learned sunrise as a language and rested beneath it. The roots had grown into a pattern that looked like an open hand, and he set his day there, palm to palm, maker to maid. I will be less seen now, he said without moving his mouth, but more felt. I will be less named but more near. I will be less asked for, but more found. The tree, fluent in listening, let 5 leaves fall without hurry, and each leaf chose a vocation while it fell. One became a map for the lost. One became a shade for the weary. One became a note in a lullaby. One became a bookmark in a hard chapter. And one simply became the sound of yes, whenever yes was needed. He watched them settle and knew the next segment would belong to those who carry light in ordinary jars. All that remained was the blessing that doesn't draw attention to itself. So he stood, and the ground rose half a breath to meet him, and he lifted the whole evening as if it were a sleeping child, and he carried it to the bed of tomorrow and tucked it in with the quilt of enough. Around the edges of everything, crickets stitched a neat seam of still here, and the sea, which has always known how to rock the planet, rocked a little longer for anyone who was late to rest. Then God placed his final kindness of the day where only the listening would find it. A very small door in the middle of every heart that opens inward when knocked from the outside, and outward when knocked from the inside, so no one would ever be trapped in themselves or kept from themselves again. The door was labeled with a word so simple it often goes unnoticed: welcome. And as the stars dimmed their voices to hear it better, he touched the hinge to keep it oiled forever, and he smiled the kind of smile that makes rooms tidier without moving anything. And he said, not to be heard, but to be true. We are not finished, we are home, and there is room. The final evening came softly, without warning, and without end. It was not darker than the nights before, only deeper, like a heartbeat sinking into rest after a long song. God stood where the horizon folded into itself, where day gave its last light to night without argument. The air was still, but alive, humming faintly with all the voices that had ever spoken love into the world. Every whisper, every prayer, every word of kindness ever given floated there, woven into the quiet like threads of invisible gold. He looked upon it all, and for a long time he said nothing. The silence between his breaths was the gentlest sound creation had ever heard. He walked slowly through the dusk, feeling the earth's pulse beneath his bare feet. It was steady, strong, familiar. It matched his own rhythm, as it always had. The rivers had slowed to a soft lullaby, and the wind had gone to sleep in the trees. Stars were waking now, one by one, shy at first, then brave, each carrying a fragment of the love he had given them at the beginning. They blinked like distant heartbeats, scattered across the dark, steady and sure. "You kept your promise," he whispered to them, and the sky seemed to nod in return. The world was quiet, but not silent. Every living thing breathed with him, mountains and meadows, waves and roots, all alive with the same slow, eternal rhythm. He could feel them listening. Even the smallest creatures seemed to pause as he passed, as if aware of the moment's sacred weight. He did not need to speak loudly. Love does not require volume to be heard. He came to the old tree, the first that had grown from the soil of compassion, the same that had cradled his heart at dawn. It was taller now, ancient and wise, its branches heavy with light that did not come from the sun. He laid his hand upon its bark, and the tree trembled in recognition. "You remember," he said. The leaves rustled softly, whispering in the language only time understands. He could feel within its roots the memory of every season, the warmth of spring's first rain, the ache of winter's stillness, the patient work of years uncounted. The tree had kept his lessons better than anything else in creation. It had loved without needing reward, waited without complaint, endured without fear. "You have done well," he said, and his voice carried warmth instead of pride. "You have held my heart longer than any sky, and you have given shade to those who needed it most. You have shared what I shared with you." The tree's branches bent slightly, not as a bow, but as an embrace. And God, feeling that silent gesture, did what no one had seen him do before. He leaned into it. The Creator rested against creation. For a long moment, there was no difference between them. When he stepped back, the stars above shimmered brighter, and the wind picked up, weaving through the leaves like a choir tuning itself for the final note. "It is enough," he said quietly. "Not perfect, not finished, just enough." He turned and looked out across the world, rivers winding like ribbons of silver, mountains glowing faintly in starlight, the ocean breathing in its slow, faithful rhythm. Every part of it pulsed with his love, every corner still echoing the sound of his shared heart. And yet he knew that love, once given, must keep moving. It cannot stay in the same hands forever. He knelt down and pressed his palm to the ground one last time. The soil was cool, full of life. "This is where I will remain," he said softly. "Not above, not beyond, but within." He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, sending one final pulse of light through creation. It was not a light that could be seen, but one that could be felt, in laughter, in kindness, in forgiveness, in every moment of quiet courage. That pulse traveled everywhere. It passed through oceans and forests, through wind and bone and breath. It whispered to the lonely, "You are not forgotten." It told the lost, "There is still a way." It held the weary and said, "Rest." It entered the hearts of all who would one day live and love and fail and rise again. And it gave them a small, steady flame that would never go out. The stars felt it first, glowing warmer. Then the oceans shimmered, carrying his heartbeat into their depths. The trees straightened. The ground exhaled. Creation was alive with him again, not because he spoke, but because he trusted it to keep speaking. He lifted his gaze once more to the heavens. The constellations had changed since the beginning. They were stories now, maps of memory, lines drawn by those who would come after. He loved them all. "Tell them I was here," he said softly to the stars, "but tell them also that I never left." The sky seemed to lean closer, listening. The wind brushed against his face like a final farewell, though both knew it was not goodbye. He smiled. "Love," he said, "was never the ending of my story. It was the story itself." Then he opened his hands, and light, gold, silver, blue, soft as breath, flowed outward, dissolving into everything. His body became horizon, his voice became wind, his eyes became the reflection in every calm river. He was everywhere again, but not as before. He was no longer a presence apart from creation. He was the pulse within it. Every heartbeat, every inhale, every flicker of compassion was him speaking. The world, still and glowing, listened as his final whisper spread through the dark, gentle and eternal. "If you love, you have found me. If you listen, you will hear me. If you live with tenderness, then my heart is already yours." The stars steadied, the trees sighed, and the sea answered with its timeless rhythm. And somewhere, deep within the quiet between one heartbeat and the next, the sound of God's heart continued, steady, endless, unbroken, beating not above the world, but inside it forever.